Hi, welcome to DinMo Talks podcast. I'm Dan from DinMo, and today's episode is the DPO's role in data management. We are exploring how data protection officers do much more than just oversee legal compliance. As marketing tools multiply and data gets duplicated, governance becomes a major challenge for brands. I'll be discussing these complex compliance headaches with my AI colleague. I leave you with the discussion. Welcome to DinMo Talks podcast. I'm Dan from DinMo, your host for today's episode. I'm joined by my AI colleague, and together we'll explore today's topic. So if you are listening to this right now, there is a really strong probability you fall into one of three camps.
Oh, definitely.
Right. Like you might be a marketer trying to launch this hyper-personalized multi-channel campaign. Or maybe you're a data engineer just desperately trying to stitch together a dozen really fragile data pipelines.
Yeah, the duct tape approach.
Exactly. Or, you're a business leader who just wants to use your own customer data without waking up in a cold sweat over some impending legal crisis. You know that exact moment of friction I'm talking about? You have this brilliant data-driven project ready to go, and suddenly, boom, you hit the compliance wall. Suddenly using your own data feels like, navigating a minefield blindfolded.
It really does. I mean, the modern data landscape has fundamentally shifted the nature of that friction. We really need to take a hard look at the evolving role of the data protection officer, the DPO, because the reality we have to confront today is that compliance is no longer just a legal problem. You can't solve it with better paperwork anymore.
No, you really can't.
It is fundamentally a data architecture problem. Like if your underlying infrastructure is flawed, your compliance is flawed. It doesn't matter how robust that privacy policy on your website looks.
I mean, we all know the baseline here, right? Ever since the GDPR shook things up back in 2018, protecting personal data is just an existential requirement.
Absolutely.
Every professional listening to this knows what a DPO is on paper. They're the mandated point of contact for data processing. They cooperate with authorities like the ICO in the UK, all that stuff.
Right, the official mandate, when they're mandatory for large-scale processing or public authorities,
Yeah, exactly. But realistically, on the ground, the relationship between a DPO and say, a marketing or data team, it's often highly adversarial.
It really is. It can get pretty tense.
Because think about it. If I am a growth marketer trying to launch this critical retargeting campaign by Friday, and I have to bring the DPO in on Tuesday to review my audience logic, that is going to completely kill my timeline. People still view them as the digital hall monitor or, the Department of No.
Yeah, the Department of No. That perception exists, mainly because companies still treat the DPO as an endpoint auditor rather than a strategic partner.
Right. Just someone who checks a box at the end.
Exactly. If a marketer brings a fully built campaign to the DPO 3 days before launch, the only tool the DPO has left is the veto. What else can they do?
That makes total sense. They're backed into a corner. But aren't they supposed to be more like the brakes on a Formula One car? Like you don't have brakes just to stop, you have them so you can drive fast, safely?
I love that analogy, yes. Their actual mandate, whether they're required by law or just appointed voluntarily because it's a governance gold standard, is to sit right at the intersection of business strategy, tech, and management.
So they should be involved way earlier.
Exactly. Their goal is to embed compliance into the workflow early on. So when they're integrated at the planning stage, they map out the guardrails, they define what data can be used and how it can be accessed.
So that when Friday actually rolls around, the marketing team is already operating in this pre-approved environment.
Right, and they can just launch without friction.
I hear that, but treating the DPO as a strategic partner doesn't magically fix the fact that the marketing stack they are supposed to govern is actively working against them. When I look at modern data pipelines, the sheer volume of sprawl is terrifying.
Oh, it's a complete mess.
It is. Customer data, specifically PII, it's the strategic lifeblood of the company. But it doesn't live in a vacuum. It's flowing out of the CRM. It's triggering off physical point of sale systems, feeding into ad networks, customer service chats.
Yeah, and if you look at the stats, according to Better Cloud, the average company now relies on more than 100 business applications daily.
Wait, 100?
Yeah.
Daily?
Over 100. Daily. And every single one of those applications is a distinct processing environment. Every interaction a customer has with your brand becomes a data point. And, the instinct for most organizations is just to pipe that data into as many tools as possible to maximize its utility.
Which introduces this massive architectural headache. Because if we have 100 applications, we don't just have one unified view of the customer. We are creating this crazy labyrinth of data movement.
Exactly. It's totally fragmented.
Like in traditional setups, data engineers are building these complex ETL pipelines, extract, transform, load. They're pulling a raw list of customer emails from a database, dumping it into a cloud bucket, running a script to format it, loading it into a marketing tool, and then syncing it over to an ad platform.
And every single step in that ETL process creates a persistent copy of the data.
Right.
You extract it, you copy it, transform it, copy it again, load it, copy it. This fragmentation is just a catastrophic vulnerability for a company.
It's terrifying. It's like having a highly classified document, but instead of keeping it in a vault, you're making 100 photocopies and handing them out to different departments who then just leave them in random filing cabinets. How can you possibly have a single source of truth with that?
You can't. And every single time that data is duplicated and stored in a new app, your compliance perimeter expands. The blast radius of a potential breach just multiplies.
Okay, let's visualize the nightmare scenario for a DPO here.
Yeah.
Say a customer submits a formal right-to-be-forgotten request.
Oh, boy.
Right. In a centralized system, you delete their profile and you're done. But in the reality you just described, the DPO has to ensure that customers' PII is purged from the core database, but also from the marketing tool's internal storage, the analytics platform's cache.
The customer success platform.
Yes. And the random CSV files a data analyst exported last month to run a quick ad hoc report. I mean, how is governance even possible in that setup?
It becomes a game of chasing shadows. It really does. I mean, managing access rights alone is nearly impossible when data lives in 100 different silos.
I can't even imagine.
You have to audit who has administrative rights to download lists from the CRM, who can view plain text emails in the support software, and how long each vendor retains that data on their proprietary servers. This is exactly why the traditional approach to solving data fragmentation actually just made the whole problem worse.
You were talking about the era of the traditional customer data platform, the CDP.
Exactly.
The pitch was always incredibly compelling for marketers. Like, buy this all-in-one CDP, and we will automatically centralize all your fragmented customer data into one perfect unified profile.
It sounded like magic.
It really did. But from an architectural standpoint, and specifically from our native perspective here at DinMo, traditional CDPs rely on what I consider to be a very dangerous illusion, the no-copy myth.
Yes, the no-copy myth is huge. Software vendors frequently market their platforms as seamlessly connecting to a data warehouse without creating redundancy. But the mechanical reality is entirely different.
Because they have to pull the data in, right?
Exactly. For a traditional CDP to perform identity resolution or build audience segments or trigger real-time events, it needs the data to be in a highly specific format optimized for its own proprietary compute engine.
Right.
So the CDP must ingest the data. It literally copies your customer profiles, their behavioral events, all their attributes right out of your secure internal data warehouse and replicates them into its own parallel database hosted on the vendor's server.
Wait, I need to stop you there because this is where the technical feasibility of the alternative always trips people up.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am building a highly complex audience segment, let's say I want to find every customer who purchased a specific pair of shoes in the last 30 days, lives in London, and has an average order value over $200.
Okay, a pretty standard targeted segment.
Right. If the tool I am using to build that segment doesn't ingest the raw data to calculate those parameters, how can it possibly find those users? It just feels technologically impossible to do the math without holding the numbers.
And that right there is the core innovation of a composable or warehouse native architecture. The math doesn't happen in the marketing application at all. It happens in the database.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. When you use a composable platform, the interface the marketer uses is essentially just a translation layer. So the marketer uses a visual builder to select those parameters, shoes, 30 days, London, high order value.
Right, they just click the buttons.
Exactly. And then the platform translates that visual logic into a complex SQL query and pushes that query directly down into the organization's cloud data warehouse.
So the compute is happening entirely within environments like Snowflake, Google BigQuery, or Databricks.
Precisely. The warehouse executes the query on its own securely stored data. It crunches the numbers itself and isolates the specific list of user IDs that match your criteria.
That's brilliant.
It is. The Composable platform simply takes that final computed result and routes it to the activation channel, like your ad network or email tool. The raw customer data, all the underlying PII, the historical transaction logs, none of it ever leaves the secure confines of the IT-approved warehouse.
So it's a genuine zero-copy architecture.
Yeah.
Built on privacy by design.
Exact.
I see. So if the traditional CDP approach is like playing a game of telephone, where the data gets whispered from the warehouse to the CDP server to the marketing tool, degrading insecurity and multiplying risk at every stop, then the Composable approach is like everyone in the organization reading from the exact same teleprompter. Like the data stays in one locked room and the tools just look at the screen to know what to do next.
That captures the structural difference perfectly. The teleprompter analogy is spot on, and the compliance implications of reading from that single teleprompter are just immediate.
Because the DPO's control scope is instantly defined?
Yes. The master data lives in the data warehouse, governed by the organization's primary security protocols. The data flows are strictly tracked because the Composable layer acts as a router, not a storage locker.
So when that right-to-be-forgotten request comes in?
The process is totally linear. You execute the dilution in the core data warehouse, and because no secondary applications are holding shadow copies of the profile, the compliance action propagates naturally.
That is a massive relief.
Oh, it's a game changer. You don't have to audit third-party vendors' storage policies because the vendors aren't storing your raw data in the first place.
This drastically alters the day-to-day reality of the DPO. I mean, if they aren't spending 80% of their week playing whack-a-mole with rogue data extracts and auditing third-party CDP storage layers, they can actually lean into that strategic partnership we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They shift from a defensive posture to an offensive one. They can actively start empowering the marketing team.
Let's talk about that, because a prime example of this offensive strategy is navigating the whole deprecation of third-party cookies. Marketing teams are under immense pressure right now to replace that signal loss with really effective first-party data strategies.
And if a DPO is freed from constantly auditing shadow IT, they can evaluate these new strategies proactively. They collaborate with data engineers and marketers to design campaigns that leverage first-party data while still strictly adhering to regulatory frameworks.
Let's get granular on that collaboration.
Right.
When a growth team brings a first-party data initiative to the table, how does the DPO actually evaluate it without reverting back to being the Department of No? Like, what are the specific parameters they're checking against?
Well, the evaluation process is generally anchored by 5 critical questions that absolutely must be answered before a single piece of data is activated.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, is explicit consent required for this specific use case? And, is our consent management platform accurately capturing and passing that signal?
Makes sense. Gotta check the opt-ins.
Right. Second, what data is genuinely necessary to achieve the business outcome? This is the strict application of data minimization.
Okay, data minimization always sounds great in theory, but marketers inherently want more data. They want to ingest 200 different attributes into a predictive model just to see what sticks. How do you enforce minimization without killing the model's accuracy?
By focusing on relevance rather than volume. Like, if the marketing team is building a propensity model to predict software churn, the DPO ensures they are utilizing product usage metrics and login frequency.
Right, things that actually matter.
Exactly. Rather than unnecessarily pulling in demographic PII or physical addresses that have zero predictive value for that specific outcome, it forces the data science and marketing teams to be intentional.
I like that. Okay, what's the third question?
The third question is spatial. Where is this data stored during processing? Which, with a composable architecture, that answer is already solved.
Right, it's just in the warehouse.
Exactly. Then the fourth question deals with access control. Who has the technical ability to view or manipulate this data layer?
Also super important.
And then the final, most critical question. What are the tangible risks to the consumer if this specific data set is mishandled, exposed, or used in a way they did not reasonably anticipate?
Man, that fifth question really strikes at the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Because it is fundamentally about consumer trust.
It's the whole ballgame.
The entire industry is driving toward what we call marketing empowerment. We want non-technical teams to have the autonomy to leverage AI agents, build dynamic segments, deploy predictive analytics without waiting 6 weeks for a data engineering ticket to clear.
Yeah, nobody wants to wait for tickets.
Exactly. We want to unleash the value of the organization's data capital. But the moment a brand crosses the line from personalized to creepy, or worse, suffers a breach because a marketer exported a CSV to an unsecured tool, that trust just evaporates instantly.
It does. And true marketing empowerment is impossible without an underlying foundation of absolute security. The collaboration between the marketing team and the DPO transforms compliance from a rigid roadblock into a competitive advantage.
Because they're working together from day one.
Right. When an organization utilizes a modular, composable setup, the marketer gains autonomy specifically because the environment is secure by design. The predictive AI tools they deploy are operating exclusively on governed data.
So the guardrails are hard-coded into the architecture itself.
Yes. The marketing team can push the envelope on personalization, secure in the knowledge that the system itself prevents them from violating compliance protocols.
They aren't worrying about the brakes, they are just driving the car. The technical infrastructure handles the safety.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Well, let's bring this all together. We've covered a massive amount of ground today. If you take nothing else away from this deep dive, let it be this. The role of the data protection officer is deeply, intrinsically tied to how your company's data stack is engineered. You cannot divorce legal compliance from software architecture.
You really can't.
Multiplying copies of your customer data across a fragmented web of applications exponentially multiplies your organizational risk. It creates dark data, blind spots, and administrative nightmares.
And shifting to a warehouse-native, zero-copy architecture fundamentally solves the root cause of that friction. It shrinks the compliance perimeter, provides the DPO with absolute visibility, and empowers your marketing teams to act faster.
Utilizing their data capital without compromising consumer trust.
Exactly, because the architecture you choose dictates the reality you operate within. And, this leads to a critical realization for anyone involved in evaluating, building, or purchasing software infrastructure. Well, think about it. If a purely technical choice, like whether a marketing platform ingests a copy of your data or executes push-down queries directly in your warehouse, can completely redefine your legal liability and compliance posture, what other invisible architectural mechanisms in your daily software stack are secretly dictating your company's highest business risks right now?
Wow, that is a phenomenal question to leave hanging. Seriously, look at your own stack, trace the data flows, look at where the information actually lives and how it moves, rather than just reading the marketing brochure of your vendors, because the reality of your risk is in the pipes. Thank you for listening to this DinMo Talks episode. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. See you next time for another conversation on DinMo Talks.